What happens when one of music's biggest legends walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly chat and instead gets ambushed by a host who just won't let up? In just 46 seconds, a simple question about his latest album turns into one of the most shocking moments in British television history, exposing a host who clearly forgot who she was dealing with. Elton John arrived at the Loose Women's studio that morning in good spirits. He'd been on the show before. The panel had always been welcoming, always respectful. He settled into his seat on the famous purple sofa, adjusting his signature glasses as the cameras rolled. The studio audience applauded warmly. This was supposed to be easy. A quick appearance, some laughs, maybe play a song. But from the very first question, something felt off. Denise Welch leaned forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, Elton," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we've all heard the rumors about your new album. Some people are saying you're a bit past your prime, aren't you? I mean, how much longer can you really keep doing this?" The audience went silent. You could hear a pin drop. The other panelists, Kay Adams, Nadia Sawalha, and Jane Moore, exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't how interviews usually started. Elton's smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "Well, Denise, I think my fans would disagree with that," he said calmly. "The album's already doing incredibly well, and I'm still selling out arenas around the world. I think I've got a few more years in me yet." It was a gracious response, diplomatic, the kind of answer a professional gives when someone's clearly trying to provoke them. But Denise wasn't done, not even close. "Yes, but don't you think there comes a time when artists should just, step aside?" she pressed, leaning even closer. "Let the younger generation have their moment. I mean, we don't need another farewell tour, do we?" Kay Adams jumped in quickly, trying to redirect. "I think what Denise means is that you've had such an incredible career, Elton. Your legacy is already cemented." "No, that's not what I mean at all," Denise interrupted, cutting Kay off mid-sentence. "I'm asking if he realizes that people are tired of the same old thing. The same old songs. The same old spectacle." Nadia Sawalha shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Denise, I don't think that's fair. Elton's music is timeless." "I'm just being honest," Denise shot back, not even looking at Nadia. Her eyes stayed fixed on Elton. "Someone has to say it. You've had your time in the spotlight, haven't you? Why not just enjoy retirement?" Elton's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the arms of the sofa. The audience was dead silent now, watching this train wreck unfold. Jane Moore looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. "I'm still here because I love what I do," Elton said, his voice measured but firm. "And clearly people still want to hear my music. Otherwise, I wouldn't be breaking records at my age." "Breaking records?" Denise let out a laugh that sounded more like a scoff. "Or breaking hips? Come on, Elton. Be serious. You're what, 70-something? How much longer can you really keep up this pace?" "Denise!" Jane Moore finally spoke up, her voice sharp. "That's completely out of line." "It's a valid question," Denise insisted, waving Jane off dismissively. "We're all thinking it. I'm just the only one brave enough to ask." Elton took a deep breath. You could see him counting to 10 in his head. "I think you'll find that most people aren't thinking that at all, Denise. In fact, most people have been nothing but supportive." "Supportive? Or just nostalgic?" Denise leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "There's a difference, you know. People might buy your albums out of nostalgia, but that doesn't mean they actually think you're still relevant." The other panelists looked horrified. Kay Adams tried again. "I completely disagree with that. Elton's latest single has been all over the radio. Young people are discovering his music every day." "Young people listen to him ironically," Denise said with a dismissive wave. "They're not actually fans. They just think it's retro or kitsch or whatever they call it these days." That was it. That was the moment Elton's composure finally cracked. His face flushed red. His voice, when he spoke, was ice cold. "I'm sorry, but who exactly do you think you are?" he asked quietly. The quiet was somehow more powerful than if he'd shouted. "You sit here on your little daytime show, making these outrageous statements about my career, my relevance, my age. What have you done that gives you the right to speak to me this way?" Denise blinked, clearly not expecting him to push back so forcefully. "I'm a television presenter. I'm doing my job. I'm asking the tough questions." "Tough questions?" Elton's voice rose now. "These aren't tough questions. This is just rude. This is disrespectful. There's a difference between journalism and just being nasty for the sake of it." "I'm not being nasty," Denise protested, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "I'm being honest." "No, you're being cruel," Elton corrected her. "And frankly, I didn't come here to be insulted by someone who clearly has some sort of axe to grind." Nadia Sawala nodded vigorously. "He's absolutely right, Denise. This has been uncomfortable to watch from the start." "Oh, please," Denise rolled her eyes. "Everyone's so sensitive these days. Can't handle a little bit of real talk." "Real talk?" Elton stood up now, towering over the seated panel. The audience gasped. "Real talk is having an actual conversation. Real talk is asking meaningful questions about my music, my creative process, my life. What you're doing is just trying to create drama for ratings." "That's, not true," Denise said, but she was starting to look flustered now. "I'm just trying to have an honest discussion." "An honest discussion involves respect," Elton said firmly. "It involves listening. It involves not cutting people off and not making assumptions about what everyone else is thinking. You don't speak for everyone, Denise. You only speak for yourself." Jane Moore stood up as well, placing a hand on Elton's arm. "Elton, we're so sorry. This wasn't supposed to go this way. We invited you here because we genuinely wanted to talk about your new album." "Well, we never got to that, did we?" Elton said, looking at Jane with genuine sadness. "Because from the very first moment, Denise decided to turn this into some sort of attack." Kay Adams was nodding. "You're absolutely right. Denise, you need to apologize." "I'm not apologizing for asking questions," Denise said stubbornly, crossing her arms tighter. "They weren't questions," Elton said, shaking his head. "They were accusations dressed up as questions. There's a massive difference. A question would be asking me about my creative process, or what inspired the new album. What you did was just insulting." The audience started to murmur their agreement. A few people even clapped. Denise looked around, realizing she was losing the room. "Look, if you're too sensitive to handle a bit of pushback," she started, but Elton cut her off. "Sensitive?" His voice went up again. "I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've dealt with tough questions from actual journalists, from music critics, from people who know what they're talking about. I've handled criticism, controversy, everything. But I don't have to sit here and take this from someone who's clearly more interested in creating conflict than having a real conversation." Nadia jumped back in. "Denise, seriously, you need to recognize that you've crossed a line here. This isn't how we treat guests. This isn't how we treat legends." "Legends can be questioned," Denise muttered, but she was clearly on the defensive now. "Of course they can," Elton agreed, "but there's a way to do it. With respect, with intelligence, with actual curiosity about the work, not just cheap shots about age and relevance." Jane Moore turned to Denise directly. "You've made this incredibly uncomfortable for everyone. For Elton, for us, for the audience. I think you owe him an apology." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Denise insisted, looking around for support she clearly wasn't going to find. "No, you're saying what you're thinking," Kay corrected her sharply. "And honestly, I'm embarrassed to be sitting next to you right now. This is not what Loose Women is about." Elton picked up his jacket from the back of the sofa. "I think it's pretty clear that I'm not wanted here. Or at least, not wanted by one person who seems determined to be hostile." "Don't be dramatic," Denise said with an eye roll. You're acting like I personally attacked you. You did personally attack me, Elton said, his voice deadly serious now. You questioned my relevance, my talent, my right to even still be working. You made assumptions about what my fans think. You dismissed my achievements. If that's not a personal attack, I don't know what is. The audience erupted in applause. People were standing now, showing their support for Elton. Denise looked shocked, glancing around at the standing ovation happening right in front of her. See? Elton gestured to the crowd. These are real people, and they seem to think I'm still relevant. Maybe you should listen to them instead of just your own voice for once. Jane Moore was close to tears now. Elton, please, we're so sorry. This isn't how this was supposed to go. We respect you so much. I know you do, Jane, Elton said gently, patting her hand. And Kay and Nadia. You three have been lovely. But I can't stay here and be disrespected like this. I've got too much self-respect for that. You're really going to leave? Denise said, and for the first time, she sounded uncertain. Over a few questions? Over your attitude, Elton corrected her. Over your clear desire to tear someone down instead of building them up. Over your complete lack of professionalism. Yes, I'm really going to leave. Kay stood up quickly. Elton, we understand completely, and we're mortified that this happened on our show. It's not your fault, Elton assured her. You tried to redirect multiple times. You all did. But some people just can't help themselves. Denise finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. Look, maybe I came on a bit strong, but... A bit strong? Nadia interrupted her, shaking her head. Denise, you were rude from the very first question. There's no excuse for it. I was trying to be interesting, Denise said weakly. To ask questions nobody else would ask. There's a reason nobody else would ask those questions, Elton said, putting his jacket on. Because they're insulting. Because they're based on your own biases and assumptions, not on anything real. Because they're designed to hurt, not to illuminate. Jane Moore addressed the camera directly. We want to apologize to Elton and to our viewers. This is not the standard we hold ourselves to on loose women. Some of you, anyway, Elton muttered, glancing at Denise. The audience laughed, breaking some of the tension, but Elton was already moving toward the edge of the stage area. Where are you going? Denise asked, standing up now too. We still have half the show left. Not with me, you don't, Elton said firmly. I'm done. I came here in good faith, expecting a pleasant conversation about my music and my life. Instead, I got ambushed by someone with an agenda. I don't have an agenda, Denise protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Then what would you call it? Elton challenged her. Because from where I'm standing, it looked like you decided before I even walked out here that you were going to try to take me down a peg. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it didn't work. Nadia stood up too, moving toward Elton. Please know that we're not all like this. Most of us have enormous respect for you and your work. I know that, Elton said warmly, giving her a quick hug. And I appreciate it. But I can't stay somewhere I'm not respected by everyone on the panel. It's just not worth it. Kay Adams hugged him too. We completely understand, and we're so sorry. Jane Moore was last, hugging him tightly. You're a class act, Elton. Always have been. I try, he said with a sad smile. But everyone has their limits. Denise stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do with herself. So that's it? You're just going to walk off? Yes, Elton said simply, turning to face her one last time. Because life's too short to spend time with people who don't value you. I've learned that lesson many times over the years. And I suggest you learn it too, Denise. Because this attitude of yours, it's going to cost you eventually. Maybe it already has. With that, he turned and walked off the set. The audience gave him another standing ovation, cheering and clapping as he disappeared behind the curtain. The cameras stayed on the remaining panelists, who looked shell-shocked. Denise slowly sat back down, her face pale. Well, that was unexpected. Was it, though? Kay said coldly. You were antagonizing him from the first second. What did you think was going to happen? I thought he'd be professional enough to handle it, Denise said defensively. He was professional, Jane said sharply. More professional than you were. He answered your rude questions with grace for as long as he could. But everyone has a breaking point. Nadia shook her head. I can't believe you did that. To Elton John. Do you realize what you've just done? I asked some tough questions, Denise said, but she wouldn't meet anyone's eyes now. You were cruel, Kay said bluntly. There's no other word for it. You were cruel to a guest who came here in good faith. And now he's gone, and we look terrible. The producers were scrambling behind the scenes. The show was supposed to go on for another 20 minutes, but their main guest had just walked out. The audience was still buzzing, talking amongst themselves about what they'd just witnessed. Jane turned to the camera again. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll try to salvage what's left of the show. As soon as the cameras cut, Denise stood up and walked off the set without a word to anyone. The other 3 panelists watched her go, shaking their heads. That was a disaster, Nadia said quietly. That was more than a disaster, Kay replied. That was a complete and utter embarrassment. Jane nodded. And it was completely avoidable. All she had to do was be respectful. That's it. Just basic human decency. Backstage, Elton was gathering his things. Members of the production crew were apologizing profusely, trying to smooth things over. But his mind was made up. He'd given the show a chance. He'd tried to be gracious, but enough was enough. His manager approached him. Are you okay? I'm fine, Elton said, though he was clearly still upset. I just can't believe the audacity. To invite me onto a show and then treat me like that? It's insulting. You handled it perfectly, his manager assured him. You stayed calm as long as you could, and when you'd had enough, you stood up for yourself. Nobody can fault you for that. I hope not, Elton sighed. But I'm sure there will be people who say I overreacted, or that I should have just let it go. Those people weren't sitting in that chair being insulted on national television, his manager pointed out. You did the right thing. Back on the set, the show was trying to continue. The remaining panelists did their best to fill the time, but the energy was completely off. The audience kept whispering about what had happened. It was impossible to pretend everything was normal. During the commercial breaks, Kay, Nadia, and Jane discussed what to do. Should they address it directly? Should they try to move on? In the end, they decided to acknowledge it briefly, but not dwell on it. The damage was already done. When they came back from the final commercial break, Jane spoke directly to the camera. We want to thank everyone for watching today. We know it wasn't the show we planned, but we hope you understand that sometimes things don't go as expected. We have enormous respect for Elton John, Kay added. And we're sorry that his experience on the show today wasn't what it should have been. Nadia nodded. He's a legend, and he deserves to be treated as such. Always. They didn't mention Denise by name, but everyone knew who they were talking about. The message was clear. They were distancing themselves from what had happened, making it known that they didn't support the way their colleague had behaved. As the show wrapped up and the credits rolled, the 3 remaining panelists sat in silence for a moment. They knew this was going to be talked about for weeks, maybe months. An incident like this didn't just blow over. Do you think he'll ever come back? Nadia asked quietly. Jane shook her head. Would you? Kay sighed. We need to do something about Denise. This can't happen again. Agreed, Jane said firmly. But that's a conversation for another day. Right now, I just want to go home and forget this whole morning ever happened. Meanwhile, Elton was already in his car, heading away from the studio. He'd been in the entertainment industry long enough to know that this story would spread quickly. People would have opinions. Some would support him Some would criticize him, but he'd done what he felt was right in the moment, and he could live with that. He thought about all the interviews he'd done over the years. Thousands of them, probably. Most had been wonderful. Even the tough ones had been conducted with respect and professionalism. But every now and then, you encountered someone like Denise, someone who seemed more interested in tearing you down than building you up, someone who confused being provocative with being insightful. His phone was already buzzing with messages from friends and colleagues who'd seen what happened. Messages of support, mostly. People telling him he'd done the right thing by walking out, that he shouldn't have to tolerate being disrespected like that, that Denise had been completely out of line. It was nice to have that support, but it didn't change the fact that the whole situation left a bad taste in his mouth. He'd gone into that studio excited to talk about his new album, to share his passion for music with the viewers. Instead, he'd been forced to defend himself against baseless attacks on his age and relevance. Back at the studio, Denise had retreated to her dressing room. She could hear people talking outside, knew they were discussing what had happened. Part of her wanted to defend herself, to explain that she'd just been trying to make good television. But deep down, she knew she'd gone too far. The problem was, she couldn't admit it. Not yet, anyway. Admitting it would mean acknowledging that she'd been wrong, that she'd let her ego get in the way of doing her job properly, that she'd prioritized creating drama over treating a guest with respect. A producer knocked on her door. "Denise, we need to talk." She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at her reflection in the mirror, replaying the whole disastrous interview in her head. The way Elton's face had changed when she'd made that first cutting remark. The way the other panelists had looked at her with disappointment and anger. The way the audience had given him a standing ovation when he'd called her out. It should have been a wake-up call, a moment to reflect on her behavior and consider how she could do better next time. But Denise was stubborn. She'd built her career on being outspoken, on saying what others wouldn't say. She'd convinced herself that this was just another example of that, rather than recognizing it for what it really was, which was an unprovoked attack on someone who'd done nothing to deserve it. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Denise, we really need to talk about what happened out there." Finally, she opened the door. The producer stood there with a serious expression. "That was unacceptable," the producer said without preamble. "Completely unacceptable." "I was just doing my job," Denise said automatically. "No," the producer corrected her. "Your job is to have interesting, engaging conversations with guests, not to attack them, not to insult them, not to drive them off the set." Denise looked away. "He overreacted." "He didn't overreact," the producer said firmly. "He reacted appropriately to being disrespected on our show. And now, we have to deal with the fallout." The fallout would indeed be significant. But in that moment, sitting in the studio after one of the most uncomfortable television moments in recent memory, one thing was absolutely clear. Elton John had walked onto that set as a guest, and had left as someone who'd been pushed too far by a host who'd forgotten the basic rules of hospitality and respect. And while Denise might have thought she was being brave or provocative or interesting, what she'd actually done was reveal herself to be exactly what Elton had called her out for being. Someone more interested in creating conflict than conducting a meaningful conversation. Someone who'd let her own issues and insecurities cloud her judgment. Someone who'd made one of the biggest mistakes of her career in 46 seconds of television that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons.